I can't believe we've hit 20 episodes already here at Picture Lock. Since this is the 10th episode of Season 2, that means Picture Lock will be on a brief break, barring any huge exciting festivals until the fall. No need to cry or get upset. I'll have film reviews and interviews in between for you to get your Picture Lock fix. Now, I don't know what it's like and what it takes to be the director of the DC Office of Motion Pictures, Television, and Development, but Pierre Bagley does. With Pigmental Studios coming to the district and a recent nationwide film release for From the Rough, I'm sure we have a lot to talk about. And that's all ahead on Picture Lock. You're watching or listening to Picture Lock, where we focus on film. Now, this audience first met my guest on the State of Black Cinema panel episode, where he thoroughly entertained with his friendly back and forth with friend of the show, DC film critic Tim Gordon. And after a couple of reschedules, I must say I'm really excited. We finally have him back in the studio to talk about his 35 years of industry experience from the rough and what it means to be the director of a film office. Director of the DC Office of Motion Pictures, Television, and Development, Pierre Bagley. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Nice to be here.
It's great to have you. I'm so excited about this conversation. So, one of the things that I always love to do is just to start at the beginning. When did you fall in love with film?
Well, this is really going to date me, but I was a pre-med student at Arizona State in 72, 73, and was just a work study job, frankly. It was a job that was closer to where I was going to school, Arizona State, and I heard, frankly, that they needed to hire black people. This is when affirmative action and television was really starting to come to bear, and they had no black people at the station. So a friend of mine, who is Stan Stovall, by the way, he's the head anchor at WBAL in Baltimore. He's been on the air, but Stan lived across the street from me, and Stan was already in a sports caster, and he said they're hiring, they need a black person. I said fine. So it was $1.65 an hour, so I went. $1.65 an hour.
Wow.
it was minimum wage at the time.
Okay.
So so I took the job.
Awesome. So that's when you fell in love with film.
Well, you know what I did, Kevin? If you remember, history will tell you about Vietnam was really blowing up at the time, and they had stopped doing student deferments, and they were taking everybody. And I had a lot of friends who were being drafted. Within 6 weeks, they were in Vietnam. Had a lot of friends that got hurt. A lot of friends didn't come home. So we were watching the war. I was working at a CBS affiliate in Phoenix, Arizona. So you were literally watching this play out in real time. And at the time, Watergate was starting to happen with Richard Nixon. And I was literally at least 20 to 25 years younger than anybody else in the station, and the only black person. So I was this sort of radical guy with the big fro that was saying that this wasn't right. And we watched Nixon resign. He was the first president to ever resign over Watergate. And the media, in my view, had a lot to do with that. And I understood then the power of the media. And even though I was a pre-med student on a full ride scholarship, I went to my scholarship committee and said, basically, I'm going to try this media thing. I could sense the power of media, but I didn't want to be in front of the camera. I wanted to be behind the camera because I saw that's where the power was.
Okay. Man, that's really intriguing, just to kind of be alive there's different points in history, and there'll be different, for me, I think 9/11 was my generation's,
Right.
So just to be there on the cutting room floor and kind of get that out there, I'm sure that had to be intriguing.
Right.
All right, so take me to the 70s, Phoenix, Arizona. Now, when I was reading your bio, the phrase "started from the bottom" came to mind, and so I know you're kind of talking about this now, but you started out as a floor crew member. What was that experience like, and then how did it prepare you for the future?
Well, the good thing about it, Kevin, they literally didn't want me there. And so there was no communication. I was a floor crew member at that time. I really couldn't touch a camera. I was there to put up sets and take sets down and kind of sweep the floors. And it was fine with me. I was a sort of a young, angry black man. So I was going to be a doctor, and that's what my passion was at the time. And as I would put on the headsets, and I'd listen to these guys, and I'd watch it, and I just thought there were some things that instantly I felt like I could do this. You know, frankly, I think that anybody can do anything when they put their minds to it. Things always look complicated, but you know, I was a student who was a pre-med student who I majored in zoology and chemistry. So I was a good student, and so I understood preparation. And so since I was a fly on the wall, I could watch everything go down, and you could actually hear the mistakes, and people admitted them and got in trouble, didn't get in trouble. So I was able to really see this as a fly on the wall. So by the time I started to become a qualified union camera person, I really had a sense of composition and why the guys were late with their picks or out of focus. And so I really trained myself not to do that. And within 18 months, I was technical director of the 6 and 10 o'clock news in a major market, responsible for the 6 and 10 o'clock news.
Wow. Wow. So by 78, you had your own independent production and post house, right? And you actually had some pretty big clients, ABC, Foot Locker, Walmart. What did your production house do, and what was that experience like?
Well, post-production, as it exists today, didn't exist in those days. In those days, the television stations did all the production. The advertisers would come to the TV station, and you'd sit in the control room and you'd do the voiceover and all that sort of thing. Once the computer came about and computerized editing as we know it today, it was still analog, so it was very linear. You had tape and reel-to-reel. But CMX came out with the first computerized system, and it was 1 inch. And before then, it was quad. They were 2-inch reels that was these big, giant 2,000-pound tape machines that were hydraulic and pneumatic and very expensive and very complicated. And once they came out with the 1-inch machine, I had a friend of mine who worked in the station. His father was wealthy, owned an insurance company, and he was an engineer. And he prided himself on being one of the young guns. And he literally borrowed $1 million from his dad and said, Pierre, come with me, and we're going to start what at the time was the first post house in the state of Arizona. So we literally took over all the commercial production. TV stations, as you see today, really never wanted to do production. They only did it for the buy, for the media buy. So they gladly gave up all the production. So we became the first post-production house who did all the commercial production in the state of Arizona.
Wow. That's incredible. So you've always had this entrepreneurial go-get-it spirit, right?
Well, you know, it's about opportunity sort of meets fear. Because what happened, I remember saying to my friends, you know, I was terrified because this job in television, you know, I was pretty successful at it, and it was a great job, you know. And at that time, we were getting paid. I went from $1.65 an hour to about $18,000 a year, and then slowly was creeping up on $30,000 a year, and I was like 19. So it was a great opportunity for me. And then when I was going to go into this post-production thing as a partner for this guy, I said, what if it doesn't work? You know, and I thought, well, at the worst case, I'm going to learn how to lose $1 million. And by then I was 22, and I thought, well, wow, even if I learned how to lose $1 million, there would be a lesson in that. And so we jumped into it. The irony was that my partner was a cocaine addict, and there was no crack. There was, you know, and he imbued in cocaine, and we literally had to put him in a treatment facility, and I became the major operator and the president of the company. So it was a lot of pressure because we had a lot of bills. We spent all the money on gear. So we saved nothing for working capital because we thought everybody was going to knock down our doors, which they did not do. So it was a lot of pressure because there was a lot of times when I was the last one to get a paycheck. So that entrepreneurial spirit was, when I say opportunity meets fear, it's never, when you think about $1 million, you have a note in those days that you're trying to figure out how to pay your staff, and you got to pay the bank.
Right.
And so it was a lot of pressure, but I loved it because I've always felt I could go get a job if I failed.
Right, right. Man, that's incredible. I tell you one thing, I wish somebody would give me $1 million to go mess up right now.
Yeah.
All right, so 1997, you took your first screenplay to production in the 35 millimeter feature film, The Message.
Right.
And you know, it's funny because even as you were talking just now, you were naming some different things, technology that I have no idea what it is. So, you know, now we live in more of a digital age. So people that actually shoot on film are becoming more, you know, of a rarity.
Right.
So let's just talk about that experience. What was it like 1997 shooting a 35 millimeter film? I mean, this is around that time when, you know, all the hot filmmakers that we love are coming out. What was that like?
Well, film was then, it is now, still considered the ultimate medium to shoot on because it was expensive then. And Panavision was a camera system that you couldn't even own. You could only lease or rent a Panavision setup. And I decided that, you know, the old saying is true, no one ever sets out to make a bad film. So everyone, in those days, I had become a very accomplished commercial producer and director. And so you were doing, you know, the Jack in the Box commercials and the Chrysler commercials and Walmart, which at that time was a very small store. And they would come to Arizona only because the weather, they could actually cut grass with their lawnmowers. So I really didn't know much about Walmart. They were certainly not the behemoth they are today. But 35 for me was the medium we shot all the commercials in, and it was the prestige. You know, if you shot on 35, you were, you know, the shizzle, so to speak. You know, so it was not that difficult because when I put this together, I used my own money. It was about $300,000, which was a lot of money even then and a lot of money today because what I did was I took off a year and a half. I wrote this script called The Message. It was about an answer machine that takes over a guy's life that took place in Harlem. And so I went to all my commercial friends, the DPs, the lighting people, the sound people, and said, do you guys want to trade up with me? You know, because everybody wanted to do a feature. And I really wanted to prove to myself whether or not I could do a feature film, a narrative, because you know, they use the term director and producer so loosely, you know, in television, you know, and since I started there, I'm not dogging them, but, you know, if you're directing the news, that's really not directing in the way that we think of traditional directing. You're more calling sort of preset coordinates, and frankly, if everyone isn't set with you, you're behind and you're going to fail because you know that's a different kind of director. It takes a lot of skill to do it, but it's not the kind of traditional directing we think when we say you're here and this is what you feel and this is what you say. So I wanted to be that kind of a director, and the only way I thought I could do it was to write my own screenplay, come up with my own money, and then go out and see what it was going to be like. And so that's what I did. And the film turned out to be pretty good. You know, we got into the first Urban World Festival, the inaugural festival. At the time, Wesley Snipes and this guy, Jamie Perry, were the two guys who were in the Michael Jackson Bad video. Who's Bad, right? And so Jamie Perry was the other guy. It was him and Wesley, and Jamie was the lead in this film. So I learned a lot about directing because there's more to directing than just you stand over there and the lights are here. You have to lead people, you have to be on time, it's just a lot of other skill sets that traditional sort of, you know, nonfiction doesn't require you to do. And so after I did The Message, I was more convinced that number one, I really loved this industry, and number two, that I wanted to do more narratives.
Okay. Man, this is really cool. I'm enjoying this conversation. Listen, it's been great talking about the past. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back to talk more about the present. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter with our handle @PictureLockShow. We're actually tweeting live. By the time you see this, it won't be live, but we're using the hashtag FilmDC. And like us on Facebook. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Anthony Anderson. I'm the writer, producer, director of Anacostia, the web series, and you're watching Picture Lock.
From the Rough is a sports film based on the true story of Dr. Katana Starks, a former swim coach who became the first woman ever to coach a college men's golf team. With drive, passion, and guts, she took an unruly group of mismatched kids from around the world and guided them to an all-time record at the PGA National Collegiate Minority Championship. I have the writer-director here with me to talk about the film. You have so many hats. First off, congratulations on getting the film made. And I say that with all sincerity because not many of us actually have, one, a feature under our belt and one that got a nationwide release. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
First off, I find it interesting that this is based on a true story. But how did you get involved with the project, or did you actually come up with this story?
No, I didn't come up with it. One of my skills as an independent producer and owner of a production company, we did a lot of event production. And the National Urban League was one of my clients. We did a lot of their major events in New York. And it always started with what they call the EOD Awards, the Equal Opportunity Day. And we did pieces around Oprah, Maya Angelou. If you saw my reel, you might have seen that piece in it.
I did.
So we really did major tributes to major people in industry and entertainment. And the chairman of the Urban League is usually a person who comes from corporate America. And the president of the Urban League is usually more the staff person, the person who's there doing the day-to-day. And so the chairman of the Urban League for about 12 years was a guy named Mike Critelli, and he was the chairman of Pitney Bowes, the stamp machine company. And we had a knowledge of each other because he saw me produce their major fundraisers. And these are major, Kevin. We would raise somewhere between $5 and $10 million in a given night. And I was responsible for the videos and the music and all the vignettes that would go on and the sound and the lighting. It's just like a little miniature Oscars. And so we became good friends throughout that. I think we had a healthy amount of respect for each other. And one day out of the blue sky, I mean, after he had termed out as chairman, I got a call from him. And he said, I've left Pitney Bowes. I really want to follow my passion, which you may not know was to be a filmmaker. So I kind of chuckled, and he said, and I've had this story that I've had the rights to, this amazing woman, and I want to know if you'd like to help me. And I said, what specifically would you like? And he said, I want you to co-produce this with me. And I said, okay, knowing that everybody thinks that they can be a producer. And I said, well, I'm not interested in, plan. I said, if you really, really want to do this, we have to go at this in a serious way. And he says, you tell me how to do it. And so I wrote a strategy, a casting strategy, and a production strategy. It's kind of a phase one. This is how you get into it. Right. And for me, this was how I thought I could get into it, was we needed to go and get some major talent interested and really passionate about the film. As you know, the film is about an African-American woman. And frankly, Hollywood doesn't make films with African-American female leads. So I knew we had a great shot if the material was good. The script wasn't so good. And I told him that. I said, the script's kind of, he said, I know, my son wrote it. And so I said, let me get in, help you rewrite it, which we did. And we hit the streets with it. And I was really lucky to meet some really top casting agents there and actually casting directors in LA who'd done Dean Devlin films, which are $200 million science fiction, blow up the world, Independence Day, those kinds of films. And they had also discovered Miley Cyrus. So they did a lot of children's stuff at Nickelodeon. And frankly, they had the faith in me, Kev. When I took this project to them and said, this is what I want to do, they really just sort of intuitively believed in me because we really didn't have the money in the bank. But I actually put out a casting call for them to read. And in LA, to get an agent to really read your script without having money, without being, Michael Bay or Tyler Perry, you need a casting director to say, we're serious. And that's what happened. It really got traction behind this film. And the next thing I know, I got a call from Taraji's people that said she'll take this film no matter how much money we were offering. Wow. She liked it that much. So we started a series of meetings, and that's kind of how the film sort of began.
Wow. Yeah, so let's talk about that. Taraji P. Henson, Michael Clark Duncan, Tom Felton, LaToya Luckett. Depends on whose house, but for the most part, these are household names.
That's right.
So one question that I had was, what was it like working with these actors, especially the late Michael Clark Duncan?
It was amazing. You know, these actors don't get enough credit. I mean, you hear that all the time, and it's really the truth. Taraji is an amazing actor, but she's also a very intelligent person. I don't know why she's not producing. Her sense of on set and her awareness, her sense of timing. She's a real partner. She was a real partner, as was Michael, as was Tom Felton. You know, for me, I'm a collaborator, and when you say direct, produce, you know, I'm not acting, and even though I can tell them how I think the scene should go, you don't know if they're giving you, on a scale of 1 to 10, an 8 or a 5 or a 10. Right. But actually, you do know when they're giving you a 10 because the hair stands up on your arms, and you have to literally take a breath after you cut a scene. And that's what was happening on making this film. So it was wonderful, Kevin, because everyone was focused on the work. And I knew whether we had, in this case, we had $6.5 million to make this film. But if we had $70 million, there would not have been a greater effort by anybody. Right. Everybody brought their A game, and I think that's what this business is about, the love of the business. At the end of the day, the money and the success and the fame will come, but there's no substitute for giving your all, because you cannot afford to hold back.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, as I've talked to you about this before, I just felt like Taraji's performance is award worthy, and I'm gonna make some fuss about this come award season, but I felt like she really just elevated the film, and her performance, as I told you, it was one that everyone around her had to be on point when they came on set, because she was just that good. And you know, it's easy to just do like that after school special type of film with the feel goodness, if that's a word, of this movie. But she was, I believed her, you know, the scrappiness, and so I felt like she did a great job of honoring the real Dr. Katana Starks. And that being said, I know as a director, that hats off to you, because you do have to pull that out of your actors. I mean, I'm sure she, you know, brought it 100%, but you know, leading that cast. So, excellent job. What were one of your favorite moments, just thinking back on making the film?
Well, there was a couple. You know, one of the things about writing, like, I think a lot of directors write even though they don't get the credit, because you really have to restructure a scene as it's going down, and I was able to do that early on. I knew that the kind of messages, you know, I am Dr. Starks, you're Dr. Starks, whether you're black or white, her story is such a great story, irrespective of race or gender. And I tried to imbue that in the script. So it was easy for me, when you think you've kind of got it right, and you read that, go through that scene with Taraji, and when she gets it, then, because you know, the best acting with a bad script is really never gonna, I just never seen those two coexist. So I think just getting her to kind of say, and she had a lot of hand in that, she would say, you know what, she wouldn't do that, because she was already ahead of us in terms of where this coach was, and she was channeling her energy. So a lot of credit would go to her and Michael, because all you can do, and look, I'm going to say it for me, maybe it's my shortcoming, but I don't know that any director can be as omnipotent or omniscient to think they can figure out all these moving pieces. Those individual players have to embrace that character and really become that character. And once they do that, then you can now start to see, it's like you go from 0 to 85, and you get to 85 and you know you're really humming. And that's where this film was from the time we started, because I think it's about people wanting to help me make the best film that we could make, not the best film I could make. So it was, you just know it. I knew she was doing great work. You could see it. Actors really don't act, they actually react, right? Because you can't act that. If somebody is really upset or really saying something from their heart, and you're there, even when you're outside of that scene, you can't help but be moved. And I watched these actors be moved, and I knew we were doing good work. I felt it.
Yeah. Just a side question, have you heard any feedback from Dr. Starks?
Yeah, I talk to her all the time, and she's a quiet woman. You know, she's a leader. You know, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but she started off as a swim coach. So she wasn't even a golfer, but she's just the kind of person who, whatever she set out to do, she did it at her highest level. So I actually went and spent time with her at TSU before I even started to rewrite the script, so I could understand her. And I think there's a Dr. Starks in most of our lives, whether that's the 5th grade teacher or, you know, the coach in freshman basketball who really says, you know, you can do this, and give you the tools to do it. And that's the kind of woman she was, or is. She's a very vital golfer to this day, so, and really spry to do anything. So it was not difficult. If, you know, I think as a director, actors and scenes and music, that's our paint. And the canvas is the work that we get to do. So it was really not hard when you can hook up with people. You can't just bring anybody in, no matter how great they are. You have to be great together.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so as a part of Picture Lock, one of the things I like to do is help other filmmakers learn from other filmmakers. So what was one of the biggest challenges in production or working on the film?
Making your days. And what that means is every day that you set out to do, every line of script that you set out to do, you really want it to be on time and on point. And it's a tough battle because you don't want to shortchange the movie. And so you can always do it again. You can always do it a little better. But if you keep doing that, you're going to run out of time and money. And so that was the biggest pressure, is just thinking, you know, should I do that again? Can we make that a little better? Or you say, let's move on. And once you move on, that's it. You're done. You're moving forward.
Okay. I'm talking with Director of DC MPTD, Pierre Bagley. Pierre, what did you feel about the overall reception of the film? How have you heard things have been going since the release?
Well, I'm a little ambivalent about it, Kevin, because frankly, the cut that you're watching is not my cut. That is the cut that sort of the system took over and decided that they wanted to recut the movie. I'm proud of it because it's still my child. You know, the child may not come out the way you want it to, but it's still your child. So I think the movie was that good that it could survive the cut. For example, the original composer is no longer in the movie. And if anyone knows anything about movies, it's really the music, and the score is probably as important as a lot of the acting. So what I intended versus what it is, you know, I've learned to sort of talk about the toughest thing that you have to do is figure, do you just jump overboard, or do you still try to support your work? And I made the decision that I would support it. But those are the huge compromises you make as a filmmaker, because it's someone else's money, you know, and you have to respect that, and you have to respect that the money in this case won. So so when I see the movie, you know, and look, I think you do that anyway. There's always something you think you could do better, but when someone else takes your baby and recuts it, you know, you don't ever get over that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know for me as a filmmaker, a lot of times when I finish a film, I don't want to see it because it's like I've worked on it so much anyways. So I can only imagine if somebody stole it and chopped it up. Not that they stole it, but you know.
I hear you.
So are you working on any other features?
Oh, yes, yeah. I wrote another script. Actually, I was in Iceland doing some development work on the next script that I wrote when I got the call to be the motion picture and TV director. But it's called Blåmen, and it takes place in Iceland. And in a nutshell, it's about what the Icelanders have a language that's 1,000 years old. So they don't have a word for black people. They've never changed that syllable, so their language is as pure as it was 1,000 years ago. And black people didn't exist in their culture, but Africans did. So what they saw in Africans, they called them Blåmen, which was blue man in their language. So, so they've evolved, of course, and they call us what we want to be called. But if you go to Iceland and you ask about a black person, they still use that term, Blåmen, in a native way. And I wrote a script about a guy who gets burned out in LA and decides to take a break. And he winds up in Iceland, of all places. And he actually falls in love with the country and the culture, because Iceland is also a country that's been colonized for like 950 of the 1,000 years by somebody, the Norwegians, the British, the Danish, the Germans. So they have a lot in common with African Americans. As Aryan as they are, oppression and repression is not unique to African Americans. So Blåmen is going to be my next film. And it's an international film. I spent time with the Icelandic people. I don't know if you know the name Björk. There's a lot of great music from the Icelanders. They're very soulful people. And I love the connection. I connected with them, they connected with me, and more important, I met the president of Iceland. I've got Icelandic producers over there while they were shooting Noah. So a lot of the crews are set up. So I will always be a filmmaker, and I will get back to it eventually.
Okay, man, that's awesome. We're gonna get to a break in a second, but okay, just help me out. Iceland. Had you gone there before or you just said?
It started as a premise over lunch, and we said, I wonder if 300,000 pure white people could be racist. And when I called them to ask them this, he said, well, we don't really have black people here, and I knew that. And so it was all research and talking to people from Iceland, who, by the way, they speak 4 languages and they speak English better than most English people.
Wow.
Most Americans. So it was great, the research, a lot of research, but again, film is about escape, and I was able to escape, me and the co-writer on this film.
Okay, all right, excellent. Well, let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the DC Office of Motion Pictures, Television, and Development and pose the questions that you asked. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name's Kimberly Skirm from Kimberly Skirm Casting and Women in Film and Television International, and you're watching Picture Lock.
This is Jason Fraley, a film critic with WTOP Radio, and you're watching Picture Lock.
Welcome back to Picture Lock, where we focus on film. I'm talking with the director of DC's Office of Motion Pictures, Television, and Development, Mr. Pierre Bagley. Pierre, man, I appreciate you coming on the show. This has been a great conversation thus far. So, Pierre, tell us, how did you get to DC and becoming appointed as the director of the MPTD?
Well, talk about the flight of the bumblebee, Kevin. I was talking to you earlier about this next picture I was doing in Iceland. And after having just finished From the Rough, one of the things that I knew I didn't want to do in independent film, you really start all over again. You got to go raise the money, you got to go through this whole thing. And as much fun as it is, it's really a chore. So while I was in Iceland, I had actually raised half the money, and I got a call from a friend who was actually the chief of staff of the deputy mayor, who was actually the attorney for From the Rough, worked for me, and he said, there may be an opportunity here. Would you consider running the motion picture office? And I was really kind of like, no, because it wasn't something that was interested me. I've worked with a lot of film offices, and nothing against it. I'm a filmmaker, right? So he said, well, you should come and meet the deputy mayor and perhaps the mayor if things work out. So I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. So when I came back to the country, I came in to meet Victor Hoskins, who's deputy mayor of economic development. And I have to just tell you, I was really impressed with his vision, and I was really impressed with what he said to me. He said, listen, we recognize that you're a filmmaker, and what we want you to do is reimagine this place for us. You know, we want you to bring your signature to it. And I started thinking about it, and by the time I left, and also I have to tell you that I really got the sense that DC had really evolved, and the fact that President Obama was here. I really felt a historical almost calling, because I hadn't really thought about any of this before. But when I got to DC and walked into the Wilson Building, which is 1350 Pennsylvania, it's a block and a half from the White House, I just really had this sense that this is where I could make the biggest difference. And when I met the mayor and I came back, it was really during the time that Mandela had died. And he came in and he had done a memorial service with Vice President Biden. And I'm thinking, you know, I'm talking to this man, this very important man who's really acknowledging a world figure, world history is happening right here. And I just figured I needed to be here. And he basically said, you know, whatever you need, whatever resources you need, I'd love for you to come in and tell us what you need. And all of a sudden, this job became the most important opportunity I'd ever had. And I had not worked for anyone, as you know, since 1978. So going to work for a paycheck, not to mention the government, was a real change for me. And I have to tell you, I've just loved every second of it. I think this is an amazing time in the history of this world and certainly of this country. And I think media, as you know, has so much to do about how people know you and what we think of each other. So I thought this was going to be my place, and I needed to be here. And I've meeting you, the people in this area are a whole different breed of people than they are in California. And frankly, I think the people in California take for granted this business, and they don't look at the 360-degree person. So I've been really impressed with the caliber of passion, the caliber of execution, and just the love and passion for film and filmmaking here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely. I couldn't agree with you more. You know, a little while ago, I had the panel episode of sustainable filmmaking in the DMV, and I just feel like this is one of those places, and I think we've even discussed this before. This is one of these places where you can make things happen, and it doesn't have to take as much red tape as it might take if you're in New York or LA, but it's still a big enough city and big enough hub where you can really get things going.
Right.
So one of my questions, I guess, just as the director, what is your vision for this area? And you know, we've talked so far about you as the filmmaker and coming up to now. So as a filmmaker, you know, in this position, what's your vision?
Well, my vision, you have to understand kind of what this market is right now, right? So what you have is a huge non-fiction group of artists and artisans. What you don't have is any infrastructure for motion picture or long-form fiction television. Zero. Like there is zero post-production finishing. Now, there are many companies who can finish a film, but not necessarily are they finishing them. That's a different issue. Audio post. There's no audio post for film, long-form film, in the region. And so, and in DC proper, there's not even a camera company, whether it's Red or Panavision or Arri or whatever. So as I looked at it, I thought, well, there's the opportunity. And so my vision was to, number one, move the film office out of the just permitting part of it. And, you know, as you know, DC has a tough reputation for being film friendly. Right. And I think it's really, if you look at it as a filmmaker, and that's what we did instantly. We started talking to our permit coordinators and saying, look, you've got to give the same level of service you would if you were in the business. And so I just basically said I was going to get the film office in the business. And so we've really raised our level of permit coordination, where now we're coordinating between the Metropolitan Police Department, the Secret Service, the Capitol Park Police, the National Parks Police. And we're taking that on as my responsibility to say, even though we may not be the permitting agency if you have to shoot in the Capitol, we want the production production companies to make us their first point of contact, and we'll walk them through it. So it's much more film business savvy. And at the same time, I'm wanting to go out and attract some basically investment financing here, which we have none. There are no banks that focus on financing film, and there's no distribution for feature films. So with financing and distribution, I think this market is ready to go. But as you know, most of us either have to go to New York or LA, and most often LA, to get financing and distribution. Those two go hand in hand. And I've only been here 4 months, and I have to tell you, we're already starting to succeed along those lines.
Wow, that's great. I mean, and Pigmental Studios, an animation house out of LA, is moving here to DC. I'm sure you probably had something to do with that deal. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, my office, we led that effort. And Pigmental happens to be led by the co-producer of my film, Blahman. So it was really me saying to them, being empowered by the mayor, to say, go out and tell me what you need. And because of the mayor's ability and his vision to give me the resources that we needed, I was able to go to Pigmental, even though we didn't have film incentives. We were able to incent them to come. But the difference is you cannot incent someone to come and work in an environment for just money. They have to, just like the days of Hemingway going to South America to write, or Gershwin going to Europe to compose, or, you know, Givenchy designing in Paris. You know, this DC is a place for creation. And if you're talking to a pure creative people, they get it. Pigmental got it. And once we were able to woo them away from New Mexico, who was offering 35 and 30% film incentives on roughly $160 million worth of production.
Wow.
And they decided to come to DC, and these are animators who have done Despicable Me, Frozen, How to Train Your Dragon. These are world-class animators from Pixar, Disney, and they're going to live in the district. So that's huge. To me, that's foundational. That gives us the resources now to make it easier for you or for another filmmaker to either find financing or distribution.
And I guess that was the question that I was going to ask you, is what does that mean, having them in our area, for the producers and filmmakers that are in this area and even the residents of DC?
Well, I'll give you a good example. The first week, Marina Martins, who is the principal behind Pigmental, we had a table read at my office for a small independent film that she's backing that's being shot in Scotland. Why? The investors know her, and she was able to arrange financing. So the filmmakers think films right here in DC. So instantly, it changes the paradigm, because if you love film, you love filmmakers, and you want to be part of the community. And Marina wants to be part of our community, and she instantly reached out. So within a week of her being here, she was already helping a small independent film get made and on its way to distribution.
Okay. Wow, I mean, I know that's a great thing, and I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, the company come here and just seeing how it boosts our economy, but also for our fellow filmmakers. So transitioning a little bit, you know, there's plenty of people that heard you were coming on the show. They're like, we got questions, and I'll get into the questions in a little bit. But first, I've been in the DMV since 2008, so I'm no veteran. I didn't grow up here, but it's not a secret, as you said, this area, in terms of the filmmakers here don't have the best relationship with the DC Motion Picture Office. And as we were discussing even on the panel episode, part of it is access. And you were kind of touching on this a little bit, but if you could just spell it out a little bit more. One of the things that everyone brought up is just the ease of access for filmmakers that are here, to actually be able to go and shoot, you know, the monuments, or, you know, the iconic photos that we usually see in film. So can you just explain what maybe the issue is in regards to access? Because I know you've said before that part of it is constitutional, but at the same time, like, what are you working on right now to make access easier for those of us that are here?
Well, we're working on a small scale permit that small scale producers, someone with a tripod, maybe no more than a crew of 3, with not a lot of sound, not a lot of requirements to block off streets, block off sidewalks, that they can get a small, low-priced annual permit that will also allow them to park within, DC proper, in places that they couldn't traditionally park. And so we're working on that, and we've run that up the ladder with the Department of Transportation, DDOT here, and it seems to not have gotten any pushback. So we think that there are literally thousands of small-scale producers who meet that criteria, and who can get in, get that shot, use it for their productions and/or sell it as B-roll. When our permitting process sometimes can take 10 days. And if there was a shot that you needed to get, that the sun broke in the right time, so now you have the ability to go get it done. So I think it's really just taking a filmmaker's point of view for the film office. And collectively, I think we can solve most of the problems. We're not going to solve the constitutional issue of a family from Idaho who wants to enjoy a national monument, and you want to block them off from that. I think that becomes the one thing that's never going to change. This is the people's city. And so I think that when it comes to that, the filmmaking part will always sort of take second shrift. But there's a lot of ways to work around that.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that sounds amazing. Is there a date set on when that'll actually...
this is election season. So in this transition, we really had that ready to go. And then, with the election working itself out and the transitions having to come, there's a different group of people that really need to come in and have their point of view heard. But I can tell you that the reason why I'm here, I've met no one yet in the District of Columbia government who doesn't believe we need to find a way to make the whole infrastructure more accessible to filmmakers. But I think it has to be a two-way street. Filmmakers have to understand that this is a unique city on the planet. You've got the President of America and all those dignitaries who live here. So it's not New York and it's not LA, and he will always take first priority if you want to block a street. Okay. So there's a complexity here that we all have to live with, but I think it's worth it.
Right. All right, so let's get into some of the Q&A. Alex asked, how can the DC Film Office help young filmmakers and crew looking to break into the production world?
Well, the first thing I say, Alex, is that you have to be the one to make that happen. What we can do is support you and find opportunities for you, which is what we're doing now. We do the Filmmaker of the Month series. We're working with, for example, the state lottery that's going to give us a certain amount of the traditional production dollars they usually put into their commercials to let us go out and find the new emerging filmmakers and sort of help become a service that makes them accessible, as opposed to going through the whole advertising agency route.
Okay. Pamela was asking about a DC Real Crew, and so she was wondering, will you let individual actors / crew sign up in the database if they live anywhere in the DMV? And she said that if you look at it now, it's only about 12 actors, and so I guess it's just in regards to registration. Can they hire locally?
Well, that's a good question, and I've not tackled this regional issue yet. Obviously I'm the DC commissioner, and I'm in Virginia, so I believe we're going to have to take a regional approach. Literally, I just met with the people who run Real Crew and Real Scout, and we're looking at that right now to see how we can open it up. But it's really going to take a lot of cooperation between Maryland, Virginia, and DC, because at the end of the day, if you're using DC residents' tax money, then I've got to make a case to the taxpayer why we should give their money and pay for someone that doesn't pay taxes in the district. And that's something that we have to work out together.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and this is before we get to the next question, but I think being in this area with the DMV, so many times it's like we kind of want to lump ourselves together,
Right.
you know, because it is, I mean, you can be in Virginia, DC, and Maryland in the span of 20 minutes,
Right.
you know, so, but I do find that it's interesting that you just have to face kind of how to join all.
And I think we're going to have to do, for example, DC will always be land challenged, right? So you could do a deal where you say, okay, let's put the big trucks and the honey wagons and things like that in Virginia and Maryland. Maybe even the big studios that make no sense because they're too expensive to try to execute in DC. And maybe the talent, maybe post-production, maybe the audio post-production, maybe we can become a sort of a regional entertainment complex, because to your point, it's only 15 minutes. It's no different from going from Brooklyn to Manhattan, or in LA from Burbank to Santa Monica. I mean, that's like an hour and a half.
Right.
You know, so certainly we can do it. I think it's just going to take the cooperation between not only the artists, but the film commissioners, the other two film commissioners, and I have to sit down and come up with a way that says, okay, let's break these pieces off and we'll specialize in these and make the whole region stronger.
Okay. Michael asked, and he said, if the answer is yes, then don't say anything because he wants it for himself. But he said, is there any money that he could get for making films from, you know, going to the DC office?
Making films, you mean, would we?
Any money, any startup, any, I guess.
Well, right now, the short answer is no, because we're not offering, we don't have an incentive program because we're rethinking it. I think incentives, frankly, are a disincentive to building the kind of indigenous infrastructure we need. I think we need to, as I said earlier, we need to invest in distribution, financing, and some infrastructure. But if I just incent filmmakers, then what I'm saying to you is come here for 3 or 4 months, do your thing, and go away. So that's not building our indigenous community. So to me, and you see the issues that House of Cards is having in Maryland, at the best case, when they leave Maryland after this season, Maryland would have given them over $40-some-odd million. And the question you have to ask yourself, what could we have done with that money? Whether it's Maryland, Virginia, or DC. And I think those economics work as well for us. For example, for us to provide a film fund for filmmakers, all filmmakers. There's only a few people who really benefit from House of Cards in terms of, like, I don't think you'd benefit. I think there's a lot of people who don't benefit from House of Cards. And I think we have to try to service the entire segment, independent, video, digital, editing, you know, not just the location people.
Right. And do you think maybe down the line there would be like some kind of film fund? And I'm saying for DC filmmakers.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think once we get the infrastructure built and we've now got filmmaking happening here, then we want to incent people, and that is part of our sort of long-term strategy. And I'm saying not long-term as in years and years, but you know, once we have the indigenous piece done and we have the artists coming here, the equipment coming from here, and most of the personnel, then we want to incent people to come here. But I think that's like 4 or 5 on the list and not number 1. Right now, people talk about film incentives as it's the only thing that one can do to bring films to the area.
Okay. Last question. Janessa said, do you have opportunities for locals to volunteer with the office or roles for people who aren't necessarily making films but want to know more and get involved?
Well, we have a very robust internship program, and it's not volunteer, they're paid. And they're actually starting now, and we want to make that even more robust as we broaden our mission within the filmmaking community. And so I think there will be opportunities coming up because we're in the process of expanding the staff of the film office right now. But I think internship, to me, volunteer is, you really want accountability. And I think if you're around, you don't want to just go get coffee. You want to be asked to do something that's meaningful, that you can get something from that and we can get something from that. So I'm not a big fan of just, you know, free interns running around.
Right, right. Well, hey, that's great. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening or watching that would like to sign up for the program.
Sure.
So, how can people get in contact with you or get connected with the film office?
Well, we're an easy site, film@dc.gov. There's a lot going on. Filmmaker of the Month, Location of the Month. We're starting to expand a lot of our outreach to the community, and we read every email that's sent to us, and and I'm easy to find. I can't guarantee you that I can get to that call immediately, but we've got a really great staff of professionals at the office who are really passionate about filmmaking, and that passion is growing by the day.
Wow. Okay. That's great. So it was really good seeing you most recently. You and I, we spoke on the red carpet at the GI Film Festival. And so I just want to say, you know, for me personally, like I said, I haven't been here super long, and definitely I feel like I'm kind of starting to get into the circles of the film community in DC, Maryland, Virginia. But it was really good just to see you out on the carpet, and I feel like I do get that vibe that, you know, the film office is really kind of supporting the films that are coming out. So that was awesome seeing you out there, and I'm sure I'll continue to see you out there.
Sure.
So please keep up the good work in the office. It's been great talking to you. I really do appreciate you coming on the show.
It was great, Kevin. Thank you for having me, and you're gonna keep seeing me out there for real.
All right,
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you.
All right, director of the DC Office of Motion Pictures, Television and Development, Pierre Bagley. Thanks again. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. That's all for this episode. I'd like to thank the director of the DC MPTD, Pierre Bagley, for taking the time to come on the show, chat, and answer questions. Be sure to check out film.dc.gov to find out more information. I have to thank my crew for helping me get through another awesome season of this show. If it wasn't for them, none of this would have been possible. You can find Picture Lock on Facebook and Twitter, listen to the podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, and don't forget to check out the website for movie reviews, news, free screenings in the DMV area, and if you're interested in being a guest on the show. Now, maybe you don't want to be in the hot seat as a guest, but you do enjoy watching the show. Well, subscribe to our online newsletter so that you can be alerted of your chance to be in our live studio audience. That's all for this season. Don't worry, Picture Lock will continue to give you reviews, interviews, and more on YouTube and the podcast until the fall. But until next time, I hope you stay locked on film.